devo si bella sur le roi. Et sur toi, Marguerite, et sur toi, réponds vite.
All right, hello and welcome to Tintincast, episode 18, book 21, the Castafiore Emerald.
Now this is an interesting one, isn't it?
It is, and it's got a bit of a place in my heart because this was the first book I ever got. My sister-in-law, Kathy, got me this, I think must have been for my 8th or 9th birthday. So I had no idea who Tintin was before reading this. And I suddenly one Christmas unwrapped this. So yes, we'll talk about all of that in a minute. Let's just have a quick catch up on Hergé, where he's at. So last week, the previous adventure, Tintin in Tibet, came to a close at the end of 1959. And in February 1960, Hergé moved out of his marital home and into the Brussels Hotel. And while he had told his wife Germaine of his affair with the 26-year-old Fanny Vlamink, he hadn't yet told her that he planned to separate from her permanently. He actually remained married to Germaine, and for the public, he would maintain this pretense of still being with Germaine for many years to come, and he'd attend public functions with her. So Hergé stayed at the hotel until July 1960, when he moved into a small rented apartment in Oku, in the south of Brussels. I do apologise for that pronunciation. In the meantime, the first Tintin live-action movie is being shot, Tintin and the Golden Fleece, which starred Jean-Pierre Talbot as Tintin, who apparently had no acting experience whatsoever. He was a sports instructor, and he'd been spotted by Jacques van Melkebeek's daughter, and apparently she thought he looked quite like Tintin. So this is how he got cast, apparently. So Hergé struck up a friendship with Talbot, although he didn't think much of the film, I don't think, or its sequel, Tintin and the Blue Oranges. And while this was all going on, Hergé was throwing around ideas for a new Tintin adventure, although his enthusiasm for Tintin had waned slightly, and it would be another year until the next adventure commenced, which of course is the Castafiore Emerald, which began to be serialized in Tintin magazine from the 4th of July, 1961.
61, eh? Now, this is one I was very keen to reread because I couldn't remember it very well, but I knew it was all set at Marlinspike Hall. And having just rinsed through the first 20 volumes in the last couple of months, as we have, I was really excited to read this one because the prospect of just having a bit of fun at Marlinspike Hall with Captain Haddock and Tintin, and the fact that they've finally given Bianca Castafiore her own book, so many little appearances. I mean, I think she's been probably in about 10 Tintin books, in either in appearance or mention. So she is this legend within the Tintin world.
This is why I'm wearing my Golden Girls t-shirt tonight, Castafiore being the first Golden Girl.
She was, and a lot of people say, yeah. And the Milanese Nightingale, as her nickname is. But Haddock, famously in the books, can't stand her because she's a diva and she's very loud and she never gets his name right. And so when this starts, it's similar to the beginning of a Calculus Affair, in that you are back from the moon and Haddock says, I'm not having any more adventures. I'm staying on planet Earth and we're going to just enjoy living at this. And I think that, and so the first page is kind of similar to that. Calculus Affair is like Tintin and Haddock having a nice walk in the country and smell that air, apart from the rubbish smell in the air that they finally smell.
It's all very nature-based, isn't it? It's all, it's kind of quite, the natural world features quite heavily in the book. In fact, I think there are more sort of avian protagonists in this book than there are females in this book. There's the parrot, there's the owl, there's the magpie. Yeah.
There's a bird theme in it, isn't there? Of course, Bianca Castafiore is the Milanese Nightingale as well. So it's got that,
of course,
the bird theme. But it's just lovely because, yeah, you know, again, I live in the country, and partly you move to the country to have long walks and enjoy the fresh air and see the wild animals and just be away from civilization. And just keep things simple. I think that's what Haddock wants. And of course, I'd love to have a Marlinspike hall of my own, even though the step in this causes him so many problems, which is very funny, recurring joke. But I love the fact that having adventured all around the world, Tintin and Hergé, I imagine by this point of his life, was a little bit of a homebody. He was probably like, you know what? I want my house. I want my girlfriend/wife around me. I want my animals. I want my stuff. I want my artwork, and as a homebody myself, I'm very much, as a writer, I like to stay at home a lot and go for walks in the country. I can totally relate to Hergé's desire to do this and Haddock's desire to do this.
Yeah, in a way, it feels like almost a sort of exercise. He sets himself, Hergé, this book. There's no traveling to exotic places. There's no baddies. There's no car chases. There's no guns. There's no violence. No crime has taken place. In fact, pretty much nothing happens. And yeah, it's an incredibly entertaining book. And there's a cliffhanger on every page. Yeah, it doesn't matter that the cliffhanger comes to nothing. It keeps you engaged throughout the whole book.
It does. It's full of red herrings, isn't it? I mean, it becomes clear after about 20 pages that Castafiore is going to constantly say, "Oh my God, my jewels have been stolen. Oh my God, oh no, here they are. Oh, my jewels have. Oh, my necklace has broken." And even like everything is a red herring. The guy who does her piano accompaniment, Wagner. He, there's a plot with him. Is he sneaking out? And one outstanding, very noticeable addition in this book is what they call the gypsies in this book, and I'll call them gypsies because that's what Hergé calls them. He also says they're Romani or Romani. But,
I think that's a newer version you're reading there.
It's a newer version.
I don't think it mentions that in my version. It's just gypsies throughout.
Oh, okay. Well, when they meet the gypsies, the lady says, "That's what we, that's." Actually, it's the older gypsy says gadjo or gadja, which is for non-traveling folk. And he says, it's what we call anyone who isn't a Romani, which is interesting because near my village, just at the outskirts of my village, there is a family of gypsies. And the great thing about this book is that Haddock is appalled that they're living in squalor.
Yeah.
He's not appalled at their existence. He's not appalled that they're there. He's appalled that they're living in filth, and he insists that they come and live on his land. And throughout the whole book, like the only people to suspect the gypsies of any crime is, of course, the Thompsons.
Yes,
who are absolutely. They only turn up for a short while in this book, but they're so hilarious. But the gypsy subplot is fantastic, and he did lots of research, Hergé, apparently, and so they are presented as accurately as he thought. They're not presented with prejudice either. They're just people that are living on the land, but he says, "You're living on the wrong bit of land. Come live on this bit of land. It's a lot nicer." And Tintin is like, "Good for you, Captain. Good for you for letting the family of gypsies live on your land." And I love that about Haddock, is he's not a bigot. He's not a, he's an old man of the sea. He's not an aristocracy. He's not a snob.
Yes, he reserves his anger for other things.
Mr. Cuts the Butcher, for example. That never doesn't make me laugh. There's 2 more calls to Mr. Cuts the Butcher. He always slips it in just when you think, "Oh my God, not again." And the recurring joke of the step being broken, the marble step being broken, and Mr. Bolt, the builder, constantly not coming around to fix it. It reminds me a little bit of Big Lebowski when the dude, he tries to stop people breaking into his flat by hammering a piece of wood to the floor and and then the door opens outward anyway. The chair falls outward, and then when he comes back in, the dude trips over the the wood hammered to the floor. It's like, I think a real comedy genius can wring comedy out of some, and Hergé does it. That step throughout the book.
Yeah.
Almost like a character in the book. It's
like Mr. O'Reilly in Fawlty Towers, isn't it? Who, when he finally does come to brick up the door, he bricks up the wrong door.
That's right. Yeah, it always reminds me of that with, he fixed a washer recently. We didn't have any running water for 3 weeks. It just reminds me of like really bad, cheap builders and craftsmen that you get in, where you actually should have spent a bit more money and got Mr. Stubbs,
Yes.
And he's always got an excuse, Mr. Bolt. Oh, I was ill, I had the flu. Oh, this happened, that happened, this happened. And after a while, you're just like, oh, please. And I love the fact that Haddock decides to try and take charge because he doesn't think Nestor has called him properly. So he phones him up and goes, there you go, he'll be here tomorrow. And Nestor's like, yeah, well, seeing is believing, which I love. I love that plot of Haddock's just trying to maintain the hall. Everyone falls over that step, even Tintin.
Yes, yeah, that's right. You don't often see Tintin making a fool of himself, but he's allowed to make a fool of himself in this. But talking about people making fools of themselves, Haddock is mercilessly ridiculed in this book, just the situations that Hergé puts him in. And remember that Haddock is kind of a alter ego for Hergé now. It kind of feels as though Hergé has been ridiculed by friends and colleagues for leaving his wife for this much younger woman in Annie Blamink. And so Haddock is the one who gets to be made a fool of and pointed fun at in this book. And
yeah, and Haddock is almost like, Tintin's wife anyway, because the two of them go on, they spend all their time together, they have adventures together. And I think also Haddock being crippled with a broken leg for the whole book is also a bit of a comment from Hergé about Germaine, isn't it? Who was in a wheelchair.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that definitely figured into his portrayal of Haddock. But again, the comedy chops just pile up, because what could be worse than being stuck at home with a broken leg and Bianca Castafiore's coming over, because he's constantly trying to avoid her. He's trying to avoid the paparazzi by hiding in the gardens and pretending to be asleep and, wheeling himself off. But she's able to get his wheelchair and push him around. I mean, it's a nightmare for poor Captain.
Yeah. I mean, and it usually feels like Hergé is trying to find a way of getting all of the cast out onto the Seven Seas or something, so Haddock can do his nautical stuff. But here to give them an excuse to all be locked down, as we all have in the last year,
point. Yes, and even Calculus is there, and Calculus has a great subplot in that he's managed to create a new strain of flower that he's named after Castafiore, which is great. I love the fact that he's all sort of like, when they meet, I think she mistakes him for the guy he's based on, didn't she? Auguste.
Oh, yes.
The balloon guy.
Yeah.
And, the man who makes all those daring ascents in balloons. And he goes, I'm deeply honored. What a rare pleasure for me to meet such an artist of such charm. Your portraits are beautiful.
So they completely misunderstand who each other is. And this is the first instance, I think, in any Tintin adventure where there is any kind of attraction between the opposite sexes here. So Calculus is smitten by Le Castafiore.
Yeah, it's almost like women are to be feared in the previous adventures, because it's very much a boys' own adventure. And I think that was sometimes was quite the overbearing style of, let's just say, previous years' adventures, in terms of writers, films, everything. Women, the male gaze, women are seen as either naggers or conquests or, this kind of thing. So Bianca Castafiore coming in, she is almost like a matronly figure. But it is great to have a female character in there, and one that's so such a powerful presence. When Bianca Castafiore is in the house.
I mean, there are more females generally in this book, which is good to see. But on the other hand, there's Castafiore, prima donna opera star, her maid Irma. There's Miarka, the gypsy girl, but they all either seem to cry or faint during the book. So Hergé still isn't doing a fantastic job of representation for women in the adventures, particularly.
That's true. Yeah, they're not. It's not particularly inclusive or progressive. But Hergé, again, very much of the time. He was.
Yeah.
Don't know how old he was by this point, in his 40s or something. In
his early 50s by now. Yeah.
Early 50s, yeah. And he's it's 1961. It's not exactly a super progressive time. I think we're just coming out of the 50s, in which women were portrayed as housewives and homemakers and so forth in the media. I think the 60s suddenly became, hang on a minute, anything's possible and everyone's equal. Well, the start of that sort of thing anyway.
Well, apparently what he said was he has pulled up on this and he said, if I created the character of a pretty girl, what would she do in the world where all the beings are caricatures? I love women too much to make caricatures out of them. And besides, pretty or not, young or not, women are rarely comic elements. Is it that the maternal side of women doesn't lend itself to laughter? He sort of goes on like this. So, I mean, obviously now we know that there are some great female characters.
Yeah. Hergé's obviously got a very dated view of women, because these days, especially, I would say, especially in the last few years, women comedians, women comic actors, women, there's so everywhere, and I think we're trying to atone for, shamefully, years of people saying women aren't funny. Idiotic people saying women aren't funny, because we obviously know lots of women are funny, but these days there's thousands of funny women. You could do a huge list. Just look at Netflix, look at iPlayer, look at things on tech. There's so many funny women out there, actors, stand-ups, they're everywhere, which is great. But in those days, maybe, they were seen, Hergé saw them as they either had to be pretty or matronly.
Yes.
But times change, I think if you were writing today and you put female characters like that in anything, you'd be called out for it. But she's a great character, Bianca Castafiore. She's funny. She's very particular. She gets everyone's names wrong all the time.
Yeah, she's a proper comedy creation.
And again, she's brought with her all these characters that kind of fuel the story, really. You've got the parrot that just says, I can hear you all the time. I can hear you. Of course, Bianca Castafiore's parrot would say that, I can hear you. And Haddock obviously gets infuriated by the bird. There's some great, I love the way it shows the musical notes at the top.
Yeah, that's right. It's kind of, another new technique that Hergé is using to convey what's happening, sort of this music kind of playing throughout these frames.
It's filling the air, isn't it? And I love the scenes in the garden. It just you get to see a little bit of Marlinspike Gardens, and all looks very nice, even though Haddock gets stung by a bee and so forth. And you start to wonder what could possibly happen, but you by the middle of the book, you're in on the joke that the jewels probably will never get stolen because she just keeps losing them. And then at the end, almost incidentally, Tintin's like, hang on a minute, and he figures it out.
It's funny, I don't think it's till page like 43 or something where the jewels actually go missing.
Yeah, Haddock goes, oh, hang on a minute, she'll find them again in a minute. It's a really nice, and I love the fact that, first of all, I think the Romanis are portrayed really beautifully in terms of their the panels. They just look really interesting. There's one where they're all sat around the fire singing in the moonlight.
Oh yeah, beautiful.
It's beautiful. And the fact that they're a present, so it almost challenges you. I think Hergé is always challenging you to say, go on, blame the gypsies for the theft.
Yeah,
because it's not them. And if you blame them, you're an idiot. And then, of course, when the Thompsons arrive, they think the gypsies are the main suspects. You've got, first of all, the cover is beautiful because you've got this amazing, you're like, what could possibly be happening?
Yeah, and Tintin breaking the fourth wall again, and with the finger to the lips, almost saying that almost this is Hergé's practical joke on us all, that there's a secret, and actually the joke's on us. We're kind of not going to get what we expect. We're not going to get this incredible adventure and car chases and crime and criminals and baddies and things. We're actually going to do something very different. And the whole thing of Marlinspike playing such a big part in this book, there's a real sense of place which you don't get in any of the other books. You don't get the luxury of really being able to explore one landscape and one environment in this way, which is beautiful.
Yeah, it's the most inside adventure we've had, isn't it? There's no, apart from going into the garden, there's no changes of scenery. The house is so beautifully portrayed as well. The detail of it, the steps, the windows, it's just beautiful. I love that when the brass band arrive and then just leave completely drunk. And
that actually happened to Hergé, apparently. That's taken from his real life. This brass band turned up at his house and drank his liquor cabinet.
Oh my God. Poor Hergé. It's like, can I have some privacy? And the way the paparazzi are portrayed as well in it's a parody of Paris Match, isn't it?
Yes, Paris Flash.
Harry Flash, which is good.
And this is all, it's around the time when Hergé is becoming much more famous. He's being asked for interviews, to give interviews around the world. He'll have started to experience television studios. So he puts all of this into the book.
Yeah, it reminds me of that Ryan Johnson movie, Knives Out, this book.
Yeah, it is like that, isn't it? A real kind of country pile and a crime. In this case, not a crime.
Yeah. And so funny. The characters are so funny in that film and also in this book. And then the fact that, you know, when the emerald is allegedly stolen, Haddock phones the police and who should answer, you know, can you send someone? And he's like, what are you doing there? And it's the Thompsons, the Marlinspike police station. So naturally, it's like a good way to get them in. The way they arrive is hilarious. They just hear this massive crunch. And this, you know, all ding, ding, ding.
They're like, Thompsons? Yeah, Thompsons.
Yeah. So, Tintin runs outside and he finds that their Citroen 2CV has been absolutely turned to tinfoil underneath the back of a van. And he goes, oh, you poor things, what happened? And they're just like, I think I braked a little late. They've just crashed into a stationary van, which I love. You know, what a great way for the Thompsons to arrive, and they just bumble their way through the investigation. And they seem to be doing more spoonerisms in this book. Have you noticed?
Yeah, there's a lot of that stuff, isn't there? There's a bit that's later saying, the business is as dear as clay. That's my opinion, and I'm stuck with it.
As dear as clay. I love it. Yeah.
And they become obsessed with this notion that it's like the gypsies aided by this monkey that they've suddenly trained to get into Marlinspike. It sounds very kind of, I don't know, Murders in the Rue Morgue or some kind of a crazy Sherlock Holmes plot. Actually, there is a sort of Sherlock Holmes bit later on where Wagner is obviously sneaking out of the property and pretending he's still playing his scales with the cassette recorder, so everyone thinks he's still in the room. But that is straight out of Sherlock Holmes. I think it was The Adventure of the Mazarin Stone, I think, where Holmes goes into his room and you think he started to play the violin, but it actually put on one of the early gramophone records. So the baddies think that he's actually in the next door room when he's able to sneak next door and catch them unawares.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. Actually, I was sort of wondering what one of the first recording playing in a room to make it think that someone's in there was from. It man, obviously Conan Doyle was a genius at that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's really Agatha Christie-esque as well, in that it's you suspect everybody, you know. And I love the fact that they're talking about. The Thompsons are talking about their list of suspects and they mention Nestor. And I love the fact that Haddock goes, I refuse to let you suspect him. I forbid you to suspect him. No. Which you would say, like, because Nestor's just Nestor. He hasn't done it.
And Calculus comes into his own again. I mean, he actually does some decent inventions again this time. So when he sees these black and white TVs as the TV crews are all setting up in Marlinspike, and just goes off that afternoon and creates the first colour television set, which actually just has the effect of ruining everybody's eyesight.
Yeah, it's very well done. That, I mean, that whole page, look at this page, it's just
psychedelic, isn't it?
Psychedelic. I mean, it's the 60s, for you know, so that kind of stuff was very much happening. It looks like something out of Magical Mystery Tour. He was really having fun with the different ways of messing up a picture. And then that shot of them all going, it's not entirely perfect now, and we see everyone fuzzy. My eyeballs doing the shimmy. You know, that's very clever.
And I think this book actually also contains my very favourite visual gag at the bottom of page 54, where Haddock thinks he's all better and out of the wheelchair. and he's just leaning on the wheelchair. And the wheelchair manages to go out the door, taking Calculus with it. Calculus saying goodbye to the doctor, and then next minute he's down the steps in the car, and the doctor is out the other side of the car.
Yeah, it's really great. It's like something out of the Money Pit or something, isn't it? Or Laurel and Hardy. Oh, Jolly and Wag's in this as well. We haven't mentioned Jolly and Wag, have we?
Yes, and again, Hergé confounds expectations, because you just expect that he's going to be able to sell his insurance to Castafiore for her jewels, but no, she doesn't take him up on the offer.
I know she doesn't suffer fools gladly, and he is one. And then in the last few pages, you've got that fantastic, it's almost like a side adventure when Tintin goes, "Oh, it's probably nicked by a magpie."
Yes.
Because of a clue that no one else would have got. And shimmies up a tree, gets, the Thompsons one final last punch in the eye, but when they weren't looking where they're going.
Well, I think we mentioned this. Which book was it? Was it the Black Island with the fire brigade losing their key up a tree because of a magpie?
Yeah, of course. So it's almost like he's just borrowed it from another book.
Just ripped it up from another.
Yeah. Well, it's like Hergé saying this is entirely inconsequential. A magpie took it, because you suspect the parrot at one point.
Yes.
It must be the parrot. They're going to bring the parrot in. It's like, no, it's not that densely plotted. It's been nicked by a magpie. Nothing to do with anything. And then that last gag with it had to be, didn't it? Haddock falling down the stairs because he forgets that he's had his stair fixed finally.
Yes.
It's just so full of joy, this book, isn't it? It's very funny. And after Tintin in Tibet, it's a complete 180 in terms of style.
It is. So are we going to give this a score? What do you think?
I think it has to be a 7. Again, I wasn't sure what I was going to give this one, because I think when I was a kid, I thought it was maybe a bit boring because I was an idiot. And I wanted it to be, out in the wild again, doing Indiana Jones type stuff. But it showcases Hergé as a genius, even more, like we didn't know already, of character and comedy in a house. They're not in the middle of nowhere. They're not in a plane. There's no planes. There's no train chases. There's not really any car.
Yeah, it could very easily be a stage play or something, couldn't it?
Yeah, it could be
a few different scenes and sets.
It does remind me of the Butler Did It type. The Mousetrap. If you were going to do a Tintin play, you could do this one, the Castafiore Emerald, and have it be a big Hollywood musical. It would work. Work some opera into it. There you go. Some ideas for the Hergé estate. What about you?
Yeah, well, after the last few action-packed adventures, they've all been so good recently, and I've been prepared really not to like this one because, like you, it was one of the early books that I read, and I haven't really gone back to it since. But I found it incredibly charming and inventive. As you say, it's like Agatha Christie light, although it subverts it because there's no murder, there's no crime. Sort of comedy of errors and manners almost. It's almost like a 1960s French bourgeois comedy thriller without the sex or something. And
like Rules of the Game or something like that, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's actually great just to spend time with the characters, just hanging out with them at home, which is again another reason why I'm wearing my Golden Girls t-shirt, because it just reminded me of them all kind of like just chilling out and having cheesecake and stuff, and you just kind of get time to spend time with these characters that you love, which is fantastic. So I'm going to give it a 7 as well.
Hey, it's almost like a bottle episode, isn't it? It's almost like we've got to have them at home this week because we've run out of budget. But a lot of critics said that they thought the series could have ended with this one quite happily.
Yeah, sort of they're back home, and Tintin's moved in by this point, although that's never really spoken about.
I mean, you wouldn't you? If you were, you've been on these. He's saved Haddock's life quite a few times. You'd probably let him move into a wing of the house or whatever, and live a jolly good life. But I think it really, it feels like it fills in the little thing. Like if you were to say, what would you like to see in a Tintin adventure after all we've been through? And you'd probably say, I'd love to see a bit of Haddock at home. And at one point you can see the 3 unicorn models, can't you, in the background? And it's like, it's a nice throwback.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, I want to see a flashback episode with like loads of old footage.
Yeah, exactly. That'd be good, actually. No, you mean like a clip show of Tintin?
Yeah, clip show. Yeah, we've run out of ideas. This is the clip show.
This is the clip show. But again, it just shows you, especially coming after Tintin in Tibet, you can really see how Hergé's mind is working. He's got a genius level mind where he kind of goes, do you know what? I'm going to do this time, because he tried a few more adventures before. He didn't get very far with them between this and Tintin in Tibet. And he decided in the end, you know what? I'm going to do a comedy whodunit. And I'm so glad he did. And I didn't think I'd be giving this one a 7, but it really is one of my favorites. I think I would put it right up there with the other 7s,
Yeah, so different, so different.
Yeah.
So, what happens off the back of this? So, the Castafiore Emerald came to a close in Tintin magazine on the 4th of September 1962. It was released by Castaman in French and by Methuen in English translation in 1963. So, by now, the English translations are starting to follow quite hot on the heels of the French versions. Obviously, the book was very different from Hergé's other works, which disappointed some readers, and it wasn't as commercially successful as many of the other stories, although it was critically very well received. And by now, Hergé was turning his attention to sprucing up his back catalogue. So he'd been asked by English publishers Methuen to revise and correct the Black Island for publication in the UK. So at this point, he refuses to start a new Tintin adventure until he completes that reworking of the Black Island. So in fact, it's going to be 4 more years before Tintin and friends go on their next adventure, which is to...
Flight 714, isn't it?
To Sydney.
Sydney, yes, that's right. Yes, I've got a German version of that, again, courtesy, I think, of Harrogate Grammar School, which is Flug 714 nach Sydney.
Very good.
It is, it's a Harrogate Grammar School classic.
Oh, good. So you'll be reading it in the original German.
Yes, I will be, yes. Der Fallschirm ist gerissen. Maschinen rückwärts. There you go. Oh, that smells good.
Oh,
It smells like...
bratwurst.
It smells like bratwurst and sauerkraut. And on that bombshell...
Cliffhanger, what will Flight 714 get next week? Join us and find out.
Adios!